Hi everybody, it's Emmy from Crime Stories Obsessed. Hear me today. I'm sorry if there's any shuffling of paper. I've been making notes about this case all morning. So we will start in a second. We'll just get a couple more people in here I hope you're all having a nice day. Over here in the UK currently it is 12:50 lunchtime. I'm guessing over in America it's probably a lot earlier in the morning. Please put a one in the chat, guys, if you can hear me okay. My microphone is on. Hello. I don't want to start until got a couple of people here. Blue Moon, where are you? Good audio, brilliant. Right, we can start then. Anybody that catches this midway through, you can always go back. It will be uploaded afterwards. So this is the Carl Tanzler case, and it's an early 1900s case. If you hear any noise, I live on a main road, so please just ignore the traffic. So Carl Tanzler, okay, so he slept with the love of his life after her death for 7 years. Okay, so let's go back a bit. Carl Tanzler was born in 1876. He was a very confident person, and people seemed to believe everything he said. He was an extrovert. He told everybody that he had 9 degrees, even though he didn't. Hi, Steve. He studied weather patterns, engineering, boat building, and he did quite a lot over his career. But as a boy, he told all of his friends that he'd had a dream that one day he would meet this dark-haired girl who was destined to be the love of his life. He travelled a lot. He travelled all over the world, and at 40 years of age, married a lady called Doris Schaefer. The two of them had 2 daughters together. But everybody knew, including himself, that it was just not right, and he really wasn't that in love with her. He didn't even know why he'd married her, so ended up leaving and travelling to Cuba, up and leaving his family. Then on to Florida, and a few years later his family and his wife joined him in Florida. Although again he upped and left them all behind in Florida and moved to Key West, Florida. He got a job as a radiologist technician, changed his name because he felt so highly of himself to Count Carl Von Cossle. He was from Germany. He told everybody that he was German royalty. He was eccentric and just basically told everybody what they wanted to hear, made himself out to be better than he was. The staff at the hospital where he worked knew what he was like, but he was good at his job, and workers in those days were hard to find. He even bought an old plane that had crashed, and he brought it back to the hospital, to an old lot at the back of the hospital, in order to restore it. Now in 1930 his whole life changed when he met Maria Elena Malgaro de Hoyos. I cannot say that, it sounds too French for me. But anyway, apparently she was born in 1909 in Florida, and she was a Cuban American woman with dark hair. Her dad was a cigar maker, her mom a homemaker. Years ago in Cuban history, it was everybody got married at sort of 16 years of age. Everybody got married so young. So she married Louis Mason in 1926. She got pregnant and miscarried, and due to this and various other issues, Louis upped and abandoned Maria. He went to Miami, and she never heard or saw him again. Now in 1930, Elena got pretty sick. Her parents were concerned and took her to the hospital in Key West. And as soon as Carl laid eyes on her, he fell in love with the woman that he had dreamt of all of his life. He believed that she was her. Whilst in the hospital, Elena was diagnosed with TB at the age of 22 years of age. And back in the early 1900s, this was a fatal disease. Carl wanted to become that person, her personal doctor who would care for her. He wanted to be the one that could cure her of this disease, and he tried to do everything he could. He invented homemade elixirs and tonics, as well as other things that he classed as medicines to try and care for Elena. He even stole certain medical equipment from the hospital, such as X-ray machines, in order to install them in Elena's parents' home. And he visited her every afternoon or evening when he finished work, showering her with gifts and flowers and expensive jewelry, wine and clothes. You never did that, Steve. Steve that's in the chat is my ex-boyfriend. Okay, so you're putting me off, Steve. Okay, so Carl declared his love for Elena, and it's reported that Elena did not completely reciprocate Carl's feelings. She was only 22. She'd just been married. She was ill. And he was 53 years of age. Unfortunately, Elena lost her battle in October 1931. Everyone was upset, her family, and Carl offered to pay for the funeral. He got in with the family and offered to pay for their rent. He paid them money for food and helped out as much as he could. They classed him as one of the family, even though they knew he was a bit strange. He even built a huge mausoleum. I have some pictures here. Still load. He even built this huge mausoleum to put her body in. He visited it every night after work for 2 years. Carl even had a telephone installed in the mausoleum so he could call and talk to Elena during the day. And he told people that Elena spoke back to him and said, and apparently he said to his friends at work that she'd spoken to him and said that if he moved her out of this cold, dark mausoleum, then she would accept his hand in marriage. I think he's a bit crazy, to be honest. But anyway, moving on, it gets a bit more crazier. 1953, 2 years later, after visiting the mausoleum every single night after work, he stopped visiting her suddenly, and the family thought that it was really strange. What they didn't know was that during the night, he had used a toy vehicle to move Elena from the mausoleum, moving her to the plane in the hospital lot where he was restoring it. This became his laboratory, and he made it in his mission to bring her back to life. And over the next few months, he tried various things, including submerging her in water and then using electrical currents on her heart and on her brain in order to try and bring her back. This man's mad. Anyway, at this point, a new head of the hospital arrived and asked Carl to remove the plane from the lot. It looked messy. He didn't want it there anymore. And Carl found a new lot with a separate building. And he purchased that. He moved into the shack on the lot, leaving Elena's family to pay for their own rent. And at this point, Elena had started to decay. Okay, these pictures are not particularly nice, I'm sorry. He used hangers to try and keep her skeletal frame. He used glass eyes to replace her own. He stuffed her torso with rags to keep its shape. And he used perfumes, flowers, disinfectants to repel the smell of decay. He even used mortician's wax to try and refigure her face. He dressed her in the best clothes that he could buy and placed her in his bed where he slept. Carl slept with Elena for 7 years. People around him thought he had met someone else as he was seen in town buying expensive perfume, clothes, gifts, and he continued to give them to Elena despite the fact that she'd passed away. One of his neighbours even thought they saw him dancing at the window with a mannequin. The family started to become concerned over the rumours around town, and Elena's sister actually asked Carl if he could open this mausoleum so that she could visit her sister. At first, Carl was defiant. No, you don't need to go in there. But the sister stated that she was very ill and she wanted to see her sister one last time. And eventually Carl felt sorry for her and said, okay, that's fine, come to my house instead. The whole family arrived at Carl's house wanting to see Elena, but what they saw was not what they expected. But Carl was proud of the job he'd made and the effort he'd done to restore her. Elena's family were mortified, appalled by the state that they found her in. And the family was so concerned about Carl's behaviour, they called authorities, who 2 days later showed up at Carl's property. Carl showed them Elena's body and was arrested then and there for maliciously just disfiguring and demolishing and destroying her grave. During the interview, he expressed to police that he'd been doing everything he could to bring Elena back to life. He told them that he had restored the plane, making it into an airship, so that he could send her to the stratosphere so that the radiation would bring her back to life. Oh my God. Anyway, the authorities took Elena and they did an autopsy. It was performed and they actually found, wait for this, a paper tube between her legs as a makeshift vagina. Now I'll let you imagine on your own what that was for. Now this was not made public. Despite it all being in the news, the paper tube, etc. was not made public, the autopsy, until 1942, as this sort of thing was not talked about in public, and it certainly wasn't put out on the news. And Carl was jailed, but the statute of limitations had expired for his crimes, so he had to go free. He asked at the point that he was released from jail if he could have Elena's body back, but authorities said no. And Elena was placed in a church for so many months where 7,000 people came to pay their respects and just see her after watching it in the news. Elena was eventually placed in a box and put in an unmarked grave in a cemetery so that Carl could not find her. To this day, it's questionable as to where she was buried. Public viewed him sympathetically, said it was romantic. Of course, he was fired from his job. And people showed up at his home wanting a tour. But he took full advantage of this, charging people to show them the lab and the bed where she'd laid for 7 years. Eventually, he wanted to see his children and move back to where his family were. So he made plans to move back. But before he did, he purchased a timed stack of dynamite, visited the mausoleum one last time, and 24 hours after his visit, the mausoleum exploded. But with him missing, he'd gone, and no one hurt, there was no formal investigation. Now in 1944, he'd moved back to where his estranged wife and 2 children were. He was penniless. But the estranged wife supported him, and she met him once a week to give him a little bit of money to help him along with food. And then it turned out that when he'd been trying to restore her, he'd actually made a mask, a death mask of her. And so what he did was he reconstructed a full life-size doll of Elena, of which he continued to sleep with. In 1952, at 75 years of age, he passed away next to Elena, the Elena doll, and he was found 3 weeks after his passing. Still, rumours persist to this day about this case, whether he was actually found in the arms of the Elena doll. There was so many rumours. But I'd be interested to know what you think about this, guys. Do you think this guy's romantic, as some of them put it at the time? Do you think he's creepy, a complete nut job, or what? I'd be interested to know what you think. This is his out-of-space ship that he planned to send Elena up to the stratosphere with. I don't know how he thought that was going to take off. But anyway. This was obviously the autopsy after 7 years of being laid at his home. And this was actually what she looked like when he met her. So, let's get back to the comments. Fascinating story. Are you in the UK? Yes, I'm in the UK. I am in Yorkshire, actually. You're in Northern California. It must be very early there. Yes, it is. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this story. If you didn't catch the whole thing, go back to the beginning and watch it again and check it out. But yeah, I'd be interested to know what you think about this, because to be honest, I don't find it romantic at all. I kind of think he's just obviously a bit of a loopy one. But sounds like true love, Steve. Okay, so if I'd have died, would you put me in the bed with you for 7 years? I don't think so. Oh my gosh. So somebody's saying it's, what's that? Yes, it's only 5 o'clock there. Wow. Very early. It's too early to be watching YouTube, Joy. Okay, well, I don't do many I used to do quite a lot of true crime documentaries. I do like looking back and documenting all this stuff and researching it. So if you like this kind of thing, let me know. I'll make more of them. But until then, I'll be back again soon with some crime updates and some missing persons cases. Okay, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye. Bye.